Hello, awesome people. Today's video is about words I have trouble saying. And not just because I have an appliance in my mouth that makes me lisp. It's because I cringe every time I try to say the phrase, "I'm disabled." And you may think you've heard me say it before, and I actually have on some videos, but usually I cringe and then say something about, and I've got to do a video about that. Because usually the phrase I try to say is that I have a disability, or I have disabilities, plural. This video's been hard for me to make because it's taken a lot of introspection and consuming a lot of content from other creators in the disability community to really try and figure out why. And I want to say thank you to a bunch of those creators, and I will link in the description below. They're all fantastic, and I highly encourage you to check them out. If any of those creators are watching this, thank you. Thank you for your content. It's really helped me understand some of my own thought processes and some of my own biases. And that's always a good thing. There are different lenses through which you can view disability. And those lenses have shifted over time. There's the legal definition, which really matters if you need to seek disability income. Medical disability, I'm sure that concept matters in relation to developing a medical care plan. But a lot of times what really matters is the social view of disability. How does society view your disability? And all of those things color your personal perception of disability. What does it mean to be disabled? What does it mean to have a disability? And are those two things different? And that's what's been driving my angst over all of this. And I do tend to overthink things. Ask my friends, they'll tell you. So I've had health conditions that could qualify as disabilities pretty much since I was a teenager. But I would never have thought of them as disabilities. I grew up in both a family system and really a social environment that was not welcoming to any kind of concept of chronic illness. Really was dismissive of any kind of illness, but specifically chronic illness. It trained me not only to not complain to anybody because I wouldn't be believed, but to start not believing myself when I had health problems or symptoms, and to not pursue even going to the doctor to get things checked out that I really should have. And the social situation in the 80s and 90s, all of the conversation, at least that I remember, was around what we would call visible disabilities. Disability wasn't really a term that was applied to somebody unless you visually had something wrong. You used a wheelchair or some other sort of mobility device, a cane or leg braces, or you had a significant hearing impairment or visual impairment. So it never occurred to me that I might have a disability. If I had health issues, it was because I was out of shape or fat, and it was my fault and something that I needed to push through and keep going and do my work to get better. That health was something that was a personal issue and a personal failing if you weren't healthy. And that's a really ableist viewpoint that, that's gonna be another video. I'm not gonna have time to go into that today. It's only been in the last 10 years with the autoimmune diagnoses, the fibromyalgia diagnosis, and having to actually change my career path, and all of the research and reading that I've done around those diagnoses, that the thought of the term of disability even came up during my research. And when I realized that those conditions were disabilities for me, and I also realized that several of my ongoing conditions from really my teenage years were also disabilities. Now, some of my conditions are certainly, they cause more impairment for me than others. And it took me a while to be able to say out loud, I have a disability. I have disabilities. It took me a while to be able to say it to myself. It took me even longer to be able to say it out loud to other people. But even though I could say I have a disability, every time I had to say I am disabled, and you've probably seen it in some of my other videos if you've watched them, the way that the script comes out or the way I'm saying something, I need to say I am disabled, and I just, I cringe. And it's like, and every time it happened, I was like, why is this phrase just fighting me so much? Is it semantics? I'm a nurse. We deal with diagnoses that have criteria. If you meet the criteria, if X, then Y. And there are clear criteria for this is a disability, and I meet them. So I have a disability. But I am disabled? It feels like judgment and sentence has been passed. And there's a concept called person first language versus identity first language. And the example I always used to give was the migraine disease. I have migraine disease versus I am a migrainer. It's an old word, but I actually like it. I never had a problem with I'm a migrainer. And maybe it's because that label doesn't carry a lot of weight with it. I thought it was easier and shorter to say migrainer than person with migraine. And just as a note, some people don't have a problem with any identity first language, and some people do. So understand that just because I didn't have a problem with the identity first language doesn't mean everybody's okay with it, because it does bother a lot of people. And I'm coming to understand why that can be around this whole disabled thing, because identity first language does imply the label applies to the totality of the person. And disabled is the totality of my person disabled? That strikes differently than I'm a person with disability. And I should have understood it before it happened to me. It's helped me understand. I have a disability feels different than I am disabled. It just does. Now, why is it bad? It shouldn't be. I don't view other people differently, saying it one way or the other. It's something that I seem to apply only to myself. And it's a true statement. Virtually every major part of my life is significantly impacted by my disabilities. So the totality of my person is impacted by disabilities. Therefore, it's a true statement. So where does this negative judgment come from? And why am I only applying it to myself? So it's a combination of a couple of things. One is personal baggage, and the other is internalized ableism. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, which was 31 years ago. And for the record, I didn't just do the math in my head, it's in my script. I'm not a math person. It was I just had to put that in. It was a long and hard fight for the people on the front lines, starting in earnest in the 1970s. And that meant I grew up hearing the debate, both on TV and from the adults around me. And as a result, I really internalized the message that disabled people are a burden on society. And a lot of people, the label disabled means that they are no longer able to work or be productive. And they're applying that legal definition. So in my ableist mind, at least as it applies to me, it's okay to have a disability so long as I am managing it and am productive. As long as I can pass, I can talk about my disabilities and I can support disability rights, but saying the words "I'm disabled" makes it take a turn in my brain that means I'm no longer productive, I'm a burden on society. Whoa. And through all of this process of getting my diagnoses, coming to understand that I am part of this disability community, I've gained a lot of insight and way more empathy than I previously had for many different kinds of disabilities. And I'm using my privilege to speak out for accommodations for all disabilities in the workplace and everywhere else. And like I said, I don't have this negative connotation for other people with disabilities. Somehow in my brain, I'm different from other people with disabilities. And that's my internal baggage. I judge myself harshly on every level, more harshly than other people. Other people get grace, other people get latitude, other people get forgiveness. I don't. And that's family systems and a whole bunch of stuff that I'm working on with my therapist. But it's really interesting how it all comes together. And there's another phenomenon that happens, and it happens in different communities, but in the disability community, the term that gets applied is Disability Olympics. And some people do the Disability Olympics in terms of my situation so much worse than your situation, so I win. And I'm not talking about that because that is like so many levels of messed up. But other people tend to look at it as I'm imposing myself into this space, or I don't have the right to speak because my impairment, my disability is not as bad as theirs. I have an invisible disability, so I have no right to speak in a space where people with real disabilities are. And the other place where it happens a lot that I have personal experience with is in the abuse support community. And I'm not going to be going into details, so I hope this isn't going to be triggering for anyone, but it's very common for abuse survivors to say, regardless of the degree of abuse they survived, to say, my situation was not as bad as, and refer to another abuse situation. And as my therapist used to tell me about making that comparison, honey, that is not a race you want to win. And I finally learned to internalize that. And I think it's important because everyone with disabilities of every type, every level of function, every level of impairment, whether they need accommodations or they don't, needs to come together to work against ableism in our society. We all need to work to support each other in requesting accommodations, requesting access, working to change the way our medical system interacts with people with any kind of medical problem or impairment, in accessing the treatment and equipment that they need. And quite frankly, we need to work until disabled isn't a slur anymore. Individually, we need to work against our own internalized ableism because it holds us back and it hurts us. And it's an ongoing struggle for pretty much everybody that I've run across, and I'm certainly not there yet, but I'm working on it because I am disabled. Yeah. So I would love to have a conversation about this and get it going in the comments. So if you've experienced ableism internalized or in society, or had thoughts or comments or experience with the words we use around it, please drop a comment. If you disagree with anything I've said or want to debate it with me or have constructive criticism, please let me know. I do ask that we keep it civil, but I love to have differing opinions presented to me. I love to discuss it, and you might change my mind about something or educate me about something that I've gotten wrong. And I love that. So I look forward to it. And like, subscribe, do all the things. And in closing, I want to offer my favorite farewell tagline and goofy geekiness ever. Live long and prosper. Thanks, and I'll see you.